ask you to have a piece of scrap paper. I know they give you some.
And or your phone.
Or your phone or your computer, it could be either one. Just something, because we're going to ask you to do a few things with those as we go here. So just to go through some of the equipment, I already talked about myself a little bit, but how medakiape, dayaniahipe, wabira, bichichiape, wabirakape kinde, anayahotampe, chapidamiape. And Sisoka Duta Anke Washichiajo Emakiape Mish Sisituma Wachbetuma Mirawakan Dakota Macha Mire Yanke Mawape and Nakon Minnesota once Melon Antia Edwani Dakota Yapiwa Usbewichakia Macha Hemie Wana Anke al-Bataineh.
Anke al-Bataineh I'm Anke al-Bataineh. I'm a white settler. I'm from Minnesota, and my work is in language teaching methods. I'm an applied linguist, and so the work I hope to do is helping language teachers be more effective. And so we're going to talk today about, as Sisoka Duta said, using Dakota to be more effective in getting our learners to be more fluent in the language faster. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here and listen to everyone, as well as to be here with my Dakota teacher and talk to you. So thank you for being here, and especially to the repeat victims who came yesterday and came again today. Bless your hearts. It'll be less embarrassing today, I promise. Well, I mean, not for me. I already showed, sorry, I ran maybe 12 blocks to get here because I actually had to teach all morning. So sorry about that. It's very rude of me. I apologize. I mean, don't you happy?
Yeah. So today we want to walk you through some practical steps that we have taken to redesign our Dakota language programs in a way that combines the best findings of research into effective language instruction and our Dakota traditional teaching styles that were effective for our people before we entered into colonial schools, which, as we all know, have been very destructive to our people, especially now they're finding the graves of all these children. And we will be using the word pedagogy today, pedagogy, and that word is important because it means the way we teach and the science of teaching. But it's not just a science and a colonial way of thinking, of using that word. Dakota teaching ways are also a science. And I just want to reiterate that. Dakota teaching ways, that is a science. And we've been developing that for millennia. And they come from many generations of experience and testing. Much of what gets published as scientific research into effective teaching methods is just actually what she should be about discovering what we have known for millennia. And then taking credit for it and, getting a PhD and all that stuff. Even within the colonial framework, much of what research shows that what language teachers should do is not what they actually do. And that's why so many people are disappointed in their level of fluency after they take a language class. So we're going to show you today is how to design a program that really actually works and gets your learners to be more fluent in the language faster, but carries out our culture. And of course, you can adapt this to your own culture and community as you find it appropriate to do so.
So we're talking about research-based, referring to Western published research, and there's basically two types of research that we are joining together, and then we're talking about the specific Dakota ways of teaching and learning that actually are just being proven by that research, as Sisoka said, that have always been in use, but that Swashichus are Columbusing. So just very generally, we're talking about this kind of trendy idea of decolonizing education, something everyone likes to say, but a lot of times we don't say what we really mean by that. But here we mean moving away from the colonial European ways of teaching and learning that we know are so bad for children's minds and hearts. So when we say decolonizing pedagogy, we're not speaking about a specific language or culture, or even just about language pedagogy. It's very general. But here, we're going to relate it to Dakota specifically. But let me just speak generally. When we say decolonizing pedagogy, we mean that we're going to stop treating the teacher like they're a boss or a master. And instead they become a helper, a consultant, a guide, and they may learn along with the student, and they learn in relationship with this student. And as we were discussing, that relationship is reciprocal. It's not just a one-way street. Oops. Technology loves us. All right. And then the way we view the learner, instead of viewing the learner in the old colonial way. Oh no. We're gonna do it. All right. Instead of viewing the learner in this colonial way that they're ignorant or they're stupid and they need to be taught something, instead they're viewed as someone who's already alive, already has knowledge, has expertise, and we use that experience and that knowledge that they already have to teach them a language that they need to use for their life that they already know about. Now, in the case of language, if you saw us talk yesterday, we were talking about people who either don't know any language or can't really communicate in any language, even if they maybe understand. So we talked about how they're starting from zero. But actually nobody is starting from zero. We're using their life experience and we're just applying some language to it. So we're just helping them to live that life in this language. And they already know another language, which helps us. That's a good thing. They can make some guesses language based on the one they already know. They know about their community, their household, their family, the place where they live. So those are the things that we want to base the lessons on. And we want to base them on what they want to know. Now that's not always a direct process, like saying, what do you guys want to know? And making a list and then teaching that. Because obviously, a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. But we do indirectly find out what they're interested in, what are their lives about, what kind of things happen in their lives, what do they need to do in order to get through their life. And we base our lessons around that. So it's based around their lives in a way in which we are, as teachers, we are the student of their lives. We observe and we study. And if you teach in your own community, that's very easy for you. You're at a big disadvantage when you teach in someone else's community, but you listen and you look and you learn. And then of course, when we say we're decolonizing pedagogy, we're talking about changing the goal. We are, the purpose of education is not just about passing a test or making more money, but really our purpose is about healing the community, building a better world that we can all live in, undoing injustice, and helping people to express who they are. So these are some of the main ideas, and they align with what research has shown is the most effective type of education as well. Decolonial pedagogy aligns with what is effective.
All right. So before we get into more specifics about what we're talking about, we want you to spend a little bit of time reflecting here. And so we're going to take some time to do that, to brainstorm some ideas. And throughout this workshop, we're going to take 4 breaks. And we're going to do a little one here momentarily. And then, so we're going to take out a piece of paper or your phone, and you can type in the link down there. And then, if you follow this link, you could find a worksheet that we made for you to start keeping track of your ideas. And you can, it's free, you can have that if you want, and copy it and paste it to your computer, download it, and print it off, make copies, give it out to other people, people you work with back home. And this is kind of just a way to get your brainstorming started. And you'll see this is like how we get started creating the curriculum. You got to start with this first. And you know, initially I thought, oh, why do we have to start this way when I first started doing these things? But as you'll see, it's intuitive, it makes sense, and it's really close to our traditional way of doing things. So if you could do that, open that, or get out a piece of paper. And the question to reflect here is, how does the decolonial and evidence-based type of teaching we just described differ from what you're doing? So what you're currently doing and the model we just described, how are they different? So take, 4 minutes here and think about what type of program you want to have going forward. What type of program you want to have where you're working, what type of language program. And this is the start of your idea. So we're going to stop talking here. We'll give you 4 minutes, and we'll come back, and then we'll share some ideas. So, and believe me, this is worth it. This is part of the process. And we're going to play some background music. So hopefully you like the background music. Because I know sometimes when you have background music, that helps you think a little bit more. Helen might start dancing. Everybody start singing some songs. Yeah, so take some time and think about what kind of program you want.
The scratch papers can be shared with your colleagues.
Yeah. You can use that scratch paper in your bag they give you. You can share with people sitting next to you. If you want to do it by yourself, that's fine. Too, sometimes we just need to have somebody show us things like experiential learning, especially in our society. So this is like a step, one of the first steps, and we're telling you, like, this is a really good first step. Brainstorm what kind of program you want, and believe me, it'll really help. Welcome, welcome. We're just doing an activity here now where we're brainstorming what kind of program we want to develop, a language program, so we're gonna be starting back up here in a couple minutes, so take a seat. Come on in, have a seat. All right, we're gonna get started with the next part here. Dakota wichocha ekta Tusweca. So hopefully you had a time there to start your reflections and future collaborations that you're thinking about doing. And we're gonna have a few more brainstorming sessions here to give you a chance to even get more ideas going. And then you continue after we're done, you know, so it just doesn't stop here, it keeps going forward. And this is something I do all the time, by the way, so this is something you can do on a regular basis. And we're also gonna give you our contact information after we're done, so if you wanna email us after we're finished with this presentation, you can. And we're gonna give you some resources so you can keep learning about this method and type of teaching. So this is kind of going by fast, I know, but you will have the tools to keep working after this is done. And before we give you more time to work on that, let us explain how we have found that evidence-based practices and Dakota traditional practices go together. Traditional Dakota ways of teaching and learning, the relationship between the teacher and the student happens because the student needs to get something done. Usually something to help with their survival or to improve the community. And a lot of what young people need to learn is how to be a good relative. That requires many lessons and mentorship. And so that has always been learned through relationship that are built between the less experienced and the more experienced. And then the teacher or the elder or the more experienced person doesn't give the learner a quiz or exam, multiple choice to show, oh, they're getting better now. You know, that's not how it's done in our traditional community. They watch people do it, and then they give them feedback about what is going well and what can be improved. So this way of building relationships has always existed for our people and helped our people learn any skill they needed, and also helps us become good relatives.
Similarly, research shows us that the most effective language courses don't base on textbooks, and they don't start with grammar. They don't use word lists where we're just memorizing the words out of context. Many of us may have taken such classes and seen that we didn't become better speakers because of those, even though we did all our homework and passed all our tests. So the most effective courses start with a task that that the learner wants to accomplish in the language, and they work backwards from there, making sure that the learner is going to be prepared to complete that task when it's time. This is often referred to as task-based learning or project-based learning, meaning we have a goal at the end, and everything we do from the first minute of the course or the first minute of this unit is leading us toward that goal, and it's something that they're going to be able to do in the language. So they're practicing and preparing and building up their skills to do it. And then that means that when we're teaching parts of the language, phrases, expressions, words, we're teaching them in the kind of context that they're going to be using them in. So the word list is out, and if the job is that they're going to, at the end of this unit, for example, they're going to, oh, bless you. It's because it's Canva, not the local. So if at the end of our unit, the task is that they're going to interview an elder, let's say, then as we practice the language and we prepare them for that task, we're using the kind of language that you would use with an elder, so that they don't get in there and use the kind of language that they would use with their buddy, for example. So we think about the context, okay? And we measure their growth by how they actually perform the interactions. So when they actually hold the conversation, or they actually tell the story, or they actually answer the questions, that's how we know that their performance is improving. So if you were able to see the workshop yesterday, this is also available on YouTube. We have a video of how much the students were able to talk at the end of 2 weeks with us, and we just sit and talk to them. Some of them could go back and forth answering our questions for 12 minutes or so at the end of 2 weeks. And that's what they can do. That shows us what they can do in the language, what information they can give and take in the language. So, next slide. Sorry. I've lost my place of course. Okay. All right, another 5 minutes to wrap.
All right, yeah, we're gonna take another break here to brainstorm. So that scratch paper we had you writing on, or your phone, or whatever you were using to take notes, brainstorm. So look at what you have written and the words and phrases inside of it, and start brainstorming ways to teach those phrases with the 4 F's, so that the learners will be ready when they're ready to combine all of them and successfully complete the goal task or interaction. So brainstorm activities either from your own indigenous culture or even from mainstream culture. You know, so you could play games like, I like to play tic-tac-toe in my class. So it's a good way to learn language. And then you can sing songs, even if they're just English songs like Itsy Bitsy Spider, or traditional songs. And you can mix and match and use whatever you can think of. And brainstorm some ones that would be helpful for teaching this collection of language. So think about the phrases that make up the bigger interaction and how the students could get practice with the 4 F's.
I jumped ahead. Yeah, 7. That's, yeah, sorry, I told you 9, but it's 7, sorry. All right, let me clarify, because a very helpful facial expression made me realize that we had talked about something we haven't explained yet, so thank you so much. All right, so we just said design your language program, imagine your language program. That's obviously going to take some time. So actually we're just asking you to do something smaller here, which is come up with just a few tasks that the learners would do in real life. So I just gave the example of interviewing an elder as a task. And up here there's an example of giving a gift and receiving a gift in Washichu culture. Things that we might say how that interaction might go. If you don't know any English, if you just arrived here, you don't know how to English, this is a pretty complex task for you to do, right? You might be able to say, here, thank you. But you can't do all this polite stuff and start a conversation about it. So that might be something we're working toward with our more intermediate learners. So what are some tasks that they can do? So apologize for being confusing. But on your scratch paper, what we'd like you to do is think of some tasks, some interactions that happen every day. Think of what you use the language for. What happens, what kind of interaction happens, and just make a list of what you can think of. And then we'll use that and we'll talk about the 4Fs in a second. So, 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then we'll play some background music, you know, and these activities are tasks, they could be anything, like I said, gift giving. Some of the things I do is have them do an interview with somebody in their family, and then they talk about that. They can do some kind of like storytelling, maybe tell a traditional story. You know, there's lots of things you can do. Maybe they could make a video of themselves doing some kind of activity, traditional activity. It could be cooking traditional foods, doing a traditional game. It could be any of those things. So think about what kind of task you want them to complete. What kind of tasks should they do in the language? And they're going to play some music here. Give you a chance to think here. What kind of tasks should the students do? So now that you know what you want to teach, let's talk about how you want to teach it in a Dakota fashion. A lot of teaching is done through telling stories. There's a very specific way we tell our stories and way we listen to them. So language learners should listen to and tell stories in the right way, but we can also pick stories that use the language that are currently learning and help them learn to how to complete the goal. And that's not the only way. We can also sing songs and teach those songs to young people. We have traditional games, and it's possible and fun to teach a language through games from other cultures too. You know, sometimes I play Uno in my class, you know, or cards, whatever. And you know, you play those in the Dakota language, you learn a lot of really useful language when you do those things. And you can do mini projects or have a huge project that goes through the whole semester and help them prepare for, you know, the interaction that they're going to be doing. And they build up to it over time. Of course, practicing talking to relatives and building relationships is an important activity. And interactions for specific purposes like buying or getting something. These are all traditional opportunities for learning.
And actually, all these traditional opportunities for learning also happen to be perfect ways of making sure that the language gets picked up and sticks. Because research shows us how the brain learns language and gets it really stuck in there and remembers it. And we basically need 4 ingredients, whether we are teaching a child or an adult or an elder, it doesn't matter. This is how we've found that language gets to stick in the brain. So this is what we did not explain earlier, and there are 4 F's, but there's only 3 up here because otherwise the writing would be too small. So there are 4 F's, and those 4 F's are, I actually like to change the order of them. I like to say function, form, frequency, and feedback. So function, I like to say it first because you actually have to have it first, otherwise everything else doesn't work. So that means, what do these words do? What do these phrases do? When do I use them? And why do I use them? So a lot of times we say, what does it mean? But sometimes we say, what does it mean? And we think, oh, like how does it translate to English? But as you know, a lot of Dakota doesn't translate to English, doesn't make any sense in English, or it's way more interesting than the English, way more meaningful than the English. So it's not about teaching them how to translate these things or how to find them in a dictionary unless that's absolutely necessary, but it's about when do I say this? What happens when I say it? So if you think about the word what does mean? We could throw out one thing that it means, but then it also means other things. So it's not about telling them, oh, this is what it means. It's about now is a time when people say or how. Okay? Now is a time when people say pidamaya. Now is a time when people say aho. Now is a time when people say ho. You know, whatever it is, it's not about defining it, but it's about learning to use it in interaction. That's Alan's fault. Learning to use it in the interaction. So you think about that interaction that you just scripted, and they're going to be learning when to say each thing. And what does it do that I say that? Is it polite? Is it rude? Is it asking for something? Is it giving an order? What is it doing when I say that? So they have to know that when you teach them the phrase. Otherwise they're just repeating a bunch of sounds that don't have any meaning and everyone is wasting their time. So you have to know the function. And then there's the form. When we say form, we mean how is this said and how is it said correctly. Of course, the most important thing is pronunciation, right? Because spoken language is the first priority. We want them to speak. Learning how to spell it in whatever orthography you want to use, that's important too, that can come later. But the first thing is that they have to pronounce it in a way that the next person will understand them. So they need to hear you say it, and they need to get some clear explanation of what's happening, and they're probably going to need that many times to really pick it up. And And so we want to think about speaking with them and really giving them the pronunciation from our mouth, as opposed to saying, well, it's spelled like this. Because, you know, people can come back the second day of class and they're so proud that they studied their notes, and they walk in the classroom and they say, hand me the kuye. And that's supposed to be hamidakuye. But they wrote it down, and they went home, and they said, hand me the kuye, all night long. And now it's stuck in there. So that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to learn how to say things right. So you really want to prioritize that they hear you say the phrase many times and they pick it up, how to say it. And then they can later learn how to capture that in writing. But writing is for capturing what we say. And then frequency. Frequency is basically repetition. But when they're baby learners, they're very first starting out, they are helped by us saying, midakwe, 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 and they say it with us. But if our whole language class is like that for 3 years, they'll go nuts, right? It's too boring. So we don't just mean repetition, like literally repeating, we mean frequency, like this phrase I taught you keeps coming back in the next lesson, and 2 lessons later, and a week later, and I make sure that we come back to it. So if we learned the colors so that we could play Uno, I make sure that 3 days from now there's another activity that's gonna have the colors, and a week from now another activity that's gonna have the colors. Not just I'm gonna stand up and say, these are the colors, but we're gonna need them for something that we're gonna do. So if you forgot how to say sha, and you're thinking, why do you say that? It's gonna come again. It's gonna come again, I'm gonna point it out and say sha, and you're gonna go, yes, sha, that's what it was, right? And the more times that happens, the more it gets stuck in the brain. A lot of people have like made up numbers that they like to say. You have to hear it 40 times, you have to hear it 80 times, you have to hear it 100 times. Well, I don't know, we don't know what the number is. But the point is that when you learn a language as a baby, you don't talk for, I don't know, sometimes 2 years. You just sit and listen. So by the time you start talking, you've heard all those phrases like 1 billion times. As language teachers, we can't provide that, but we want to get as close to 1 billion as possible. So we just want to keep it coming back and back and back and back and back. We don't want to cover it once on September 10th and then hope that they'll know it on January 25th. They won't. They need many times. And the last F, function, form, frequency, feedback. Feedback is, am I doing it right or not? And when you have a baby in front of you, you do a lot of, how'd you do? Oh, good job. Yeah. Oh, you said that right. Oh, yeah. Or, what? What? I don't understand you. What? That's feedback. That's feedback. If they say, I want to eat chum-chum. You say, you want to eat what? That wasn't clear. That was a failure. Try again. That's feedback. That tells them, like, I gotta try harder. And if you say, like, I want to eat spaghetti. Oh, yeah. You want to eat spaghetti? Great. Okay, that was a success. That was close enough. I did it. So they need lots of praise and lots of encouragement to know if they're getting it. If they just talk into the wind and they don't know if you understood them or not, language doesn't develop. Not for babies, not for adults. So function, form, frequency, feedback. If anybody's looking for a good tattoo, I suggest the 4 F's so that you can just be reminded. I say them to myself every time I plan a class.
Yeah, I agree with all that was said here about the 4 F's, you know, even though we don't have a letter F in our language. So I don't know if you want to get a tattoo of that, but anyways, you know, I really agree on that frequency. You got to say it over and over, but you repeated it throughout the whole lesson, and then also the feedback. But you know, you got to do that in the way that's appropriate for you as a Dakota, Lakota person, you know, and the way you're going to give appropriate feedback. So make sure you make it culturally appropriate. So earlier I said we're going to take the time here to brainstorm some more. So we talked about this function, form, frequency, feedback, and we did those tasks that you brainstormed. So let's see if we can combine those with those tasks you brainstormed from your Dakota culture, or if it's even mainstream activity. So you know, whether it's playing, you know, a game think about all the things that are gonna go into whatever your, the task is, and think about all the phrases you need to complete that. So maybe even if you have to write in English right now, that's okay. You can always translate it later, you know, with the help of a speaker or a teacher. So we're gonna play some music, we're gonna give you, I know we're kind of running a little short on time, so maybe we can cut that down to 3 minutes here. So take some time here. 3 minutes.
If it helps, I've done an example here where I've taken the interaction and and I've broken it down into different games and stories and songs that use those phrases, and that's what we could do in the classes to prepare them for that big interaction. So something along the same lines, related story, related song, related game, related to simpler interactions that they could be doing to prepare for that big interaction.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of times this is like our traditional ways too. You know, we have an event and all kinds of things go into that. You know, somebody's got to do a certain activity and they make another person do something else that makes somebody else do something else. You learn all the different things that go into it. And over time you learn how to do each one of them. And then eventually, you know, you are the one teaching others how to do these activities. And so this is similar with the language, you know, based off our traditional ways. You have an action and you learn all the steps to it, and then at the end you know everything that goes into it, and then you're able to complete it.
Well, we can wrap up.
Oh yeah, well, I know we're almost out of time, so we'll keep going forward. And so the activities you just brainstormed are what you can do during the lessons of leading up to performing the actual final task or goal. And that way each lesson is fun and gets them a little closer being ready for the ultimate interaction that they have to carry out. But of course, each activity and each lesson can be challenging, especially if the students are anxious, have anxiety, or not very advanced in the language. And you know, the ultimate goal is to teach this all in the language, meaning speaking most of the time with very little English or none at all. And that is the most effective way to learn the language. You think about our ancestors, and that's how they did it. And when they encountered people, you know, nobody had NLD Pro, you know, as much as I love NLD Pro. But you know, nobody had that bundle. Nobody had Google Translate. No, you know, so how did you know what to do? You know, people did an action and they said a word, and you memorized it with that action. And so you point at something, and somebody else would say what it was, and you repeat those things over and over. And you get better as time goes on. And you use the language you know to negotiate meaning, you know, and so you, whatever you know, you use that to get new words and phrases. And, you know, like what is this called? Do you know what I mean? So you have to learn those type of phrases really early, and in order to stay in the language, you know, and to help build your fluency. And so, you know, if you didn't remember a word, you didn't have like flashcards or anything
to replicate that type of language learning as much as we can, although of course there are some differences because we're in a classroom, it's planned, and you're working with a big group. So that makes your job a little harder than if you were just working with one learner. So in order to do that, we use these two concepts here. This is fancy teacher talk, scaffolding and zone of proximal development. I find these to be helpful phrases, but here's what they mean. We create visuals of the objects or the people or the actions that we're going to be talking about and in the context. So because we might be talking about buying something, for example, someone has a table, they're selling items, we want to learn how to buy those items in Dakota. Well, maybe we can't actually go there today, but we can have a picture of such a place and help to envision it and what that would like, and we can act it out so that it's pretty close to the real thing. Our brains embed our language in the context that it is. So sometimes you'll hear people say, when I'm in this kind of situation, I can't think of the word, but when I'm in that situation, the word comes to me. It's because your brain knows this situation, this word. This situation, this phrase. So by removing the translation, we help them just learn that in this situation, it's this phrase. And so we can create the situation through visuals and through acting things out so that it gets embedded. With helpers like this? Just kidding. I actually need this in order to see. I can actually go on without it. Thanks. And the other thing that we have, the blessing of technology, we can make multimedia, what I call them blanks. So for example, we can have a silent video that's showing a bunch of butterflies that are, gathering around to eat something, and we can just talk about what's happening here. So we weren't able to be in the forest today and watch these butterflies, but we have the videos, and we can just talk about what's happening. For our brain's purpose, that's as good as being in this situation. Butterflies are gathering, here's what I say, right? So the videos, podcasts, things like that, they can create those real life experiences for our brain, even though we have curated them in our classroom. But just talking about it, like, hey guys, if you ever go out in the forest and you ever see some butterflies gathering, that won't do it. That won't embed the context in our brain. And then we can create visual keys for them if they are struggling with the interaction. So let's say that I'm teaching a lesson on how to use Dakota to buy something. We're at the powwow and we see some jewelry and we want to buy it. Okay, well, it's kind of a long back and forth, right? I like this one, how much does it cost? Oh, that's too much, right? It can go back and forth. And there might be a part of that interaction that they forget. For example, maybe the numbers are hard. So I might create a little help for them, this is called scaffolding, where I might put a poster on the wall that has the numbers, so that I come up to the seller and I'm acting it out, and when I get stuck, I can just look. Oh, and then I remember the number and I can continue. So we can create things that help them get through it. If they can't remember everything, that's the advantage of the classroom over real life. You can have something there as a support. And then working backwards from the full interaction, which we already discussed, but really using the simplest language. What's the most usual language that the person is gonna say? What is just the simplest way to say this? That can help, because in real life, people say things in many ways, and that can be overwhelming for learners. And then, the other way that we scaffold them and we help them along is that when we talk to them, we use the words that they know. And then we just add in a few new ones. This might mean that we do a little bit of what's called teacher talk, where we're talking a little bit different than the way a fluent elder would really talk in real life. But the way that a fluent elder would really talk in real life might be totally incomprehensible for our learners and discouraging to them. So by talking in a kind of modified way and just adding one or two new things each time, even though that may be a little bit unnatural, we ask ourselves, can it be understood? Does the person understand me? And that way the learners stay encouraged because they can follow along. So we just build it up a little bit, even though it means talking a little bit awkward sometimes, it makes it more doable for them. So those are those techniques in the classroom.
All right, I know we're wrapping up here, and we're getting ready for lunch. So hopefully you got some ideas here and learned how to do this process. You can always email us if you want to ask more questions. There's some resources up there that we're going to be putting up here, and you can go to these websites. And if you want to stick around, I'll be here for a little bit. If you want to ask questions and talk, we'll be up here answering any questions, so you can come up here. But I know we're going to wrap up here, so I want to thank you for being part of this presentation and listening to us.